Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.
Hey, babe, what are we talking about?
Today we are talking about stay-at-home moms leveling up their personal finance. And it's so important because there's so many things that stay-at-home moms can do to ensure that they are also building and growing wealth. And I think that is something that we have not talked about in the past. And it's such an important topic because there's so many stay-at-home moms or moms that are transitioning from the workforce to be at home more with their children because of this crazy world that we live in. And we know that the time we spend with our children is so precious and so fleeting. And so we want to talk about how to grow wealth, build wealth, and be fiscally responsible as a stay-at-home mom. And we've got the perfect person to do that. A mom of 5, Jenni Sisson, is with us today, and we're so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited. Let's get into your bio, Jenni, because, and I don't want to say you're just a stay-at-home mom because there's no such thing as just a stay-at-home mom. Don't ever let that phrase come out of your mouth, right? But you do work. And so we're going to get into your bio and into your background, and I'm excited for this conversation. Jenni Sisson is a personal finance writer. She's been published in Business Insider, Newsweek, MarketWatch, Finance Buzz, and Fox Money. In addition to writing, Jenni hosts the Mama's Money Map podcast to help fellow stay-at-home moms on their journey to financial freedom. She is also a wife and mom to 4 bio kids and 1 foster kid. She has lived in 8 U.S. states and Russia. We're going to need to talk about that Russia part. When she's not writing or podcasting about personal finance, she's hiking along the Wasatch Front, baking something with chocolate in it, or beating someone at Scrabble. Thank you, Jenni, for being with us today.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
All right. We start all of our episodes with a guest talking about your first money memory. So let's dive into that.
My first money memory is when I was, how old was I? I must have been about 8 years old. And I was shopping with my mom at Target. And I remember there was some shirt or dress or something I wanted. And she said, "Oh, let's wait until that goes on sale." And little me, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Like, I want it now, but okay, I'll get it eventually, So, and now as a parent, I'm sure she was like putting me off of something I wouldn't care about in 5 minutes. But I also think that it was her way of seeing like, okay, it's too expensive right now, but if the price comes down, we might pull the trigger, and just kind of being mindful about how much we're spending and on, especially on things that aren't essential. So kind of mindfully choosing when to spend money.
Yeah. We've been talking to our kids about that a lot, the difference between needs and wants, and pushing back when they think something is a need and, it's obviously a want, but they're starting to catch on. Yep. And it's been good discussion. And we did it last year too, when we, since we're coming up on the holiday season, we adopted, some children to buy gifts for, and we talked to them
Salvation
about the
Angels.
list. Yeah. The
Salvation Army Angels.
Yeah. Through the Salvation Army. Yes, we did not adopt children.
Yeah. But just for the holidays. They're just for
the holidays. Yeah. But we adopted a few children through the Salvation Army Angels program. And so we purposefully got children that were the same age as our children. And we were going through the list of their size clothing, and they needed socks and underwear and actual true essentials. And then, of course, they had a long list of toys. And so we said, if we have this much money to spend on each child, what do you think we should buy first? And our daughter, who's the older one, did a really good job of saying, well, it's nice to have a doll, but it's really important to have underwear. Like, yes, that is absolutely
Maslow's
correct.
hierarchy of needs.
Exactly. And so, just kind of incorporating those things into our daily conversations, or, we don't want our kids to have a scarcity mindset. So reframing, like what your mom said of, well, let's wait until it goes on sale, right? Which, sometimes we'll just say, we'll see, we'll talk about it later. And that's absolutely us being like, no, this is done. But we'll talk about it later. That is definitely my go-to phrase.
We'll see. It's not a no, but in my mind, it already is kind of probably a no.
It's a no, yeah. No, I was just going to say, instead of saying we don't have money for that right now, even something simple as that wasn't on our list of things that we were going to buy, or we're not prioritizing T-shirts right now, right? And just changing the way we talk about is it a yes or is it a no, I think is really important and something that I've been trying to be more mindful about.
Yeah, and sometimes it's helpful to have that delay because it kind of sifts out for the kids what is their real priority. Because if like I've been dreaming of a drum set, I've got a daughter that wants to play the drums, and I'm like, okay, is this like flavor of the week, or does she actually legit want to play the drums? And it
Right.
stood the test of time, not just rather than being a fleeting like, oh, I just saw some cool YouTube video and now I want to do this versus
Yeah.
no, this is really a passion of mine.
Right. Yeah. Well, because their minds just run a mile a minute. And what's important right now is not important at all an hour from now. And so
And you
mitigating
want
that.
Absolutely.
and you want to foster their true interest, but you want to make sure
Mhm.
it's their true interest before you put a big financial, backing behind it.
Correct. And also, this will be
Absolutely.
your interest for the next 6 weeks because we signed you up for camp. Thank you. And then you can undo that interest, but it is paid for. So it will be your interest for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah. Talk
absolutely.
Talk to us about your personal finance journey and how you got to writing for these national publications about money and wanting to help other stay-at-home moms be better with their money and work towards their financial freedom goals.
It's kind of difficult to know where to start that conversation because it goes way back. So I'll try to TLDR it. I majored in linguistics, which it's a fascinating field. It's not the most useful field in the world. And so, but I kind of always knew that I wanted to stay home with my kids. And that was, I saw my mom do. She never really had a job. She just stayed at home with us. And so that was kind of my plan. And so I got married about the same time as I graduated college, and then shortly thereafter, our son was born. And so I stayed home while working part time a little bit here and there, and it kind of came to the point where I knew our youngest was going to be going back to school, and I'm like, I don't want to do the same things that I wanted to do, with my degree back then. And so I kind of had this midlife crisis of, okay, now I'm 30 something. What do I want to be when I grow up? And
Mm.
I kind of took it like, okay, I need to figure out what can I make money doing? What am I good at? And like, what's there a demand for, and what will allow me to still have the flexibility to be at home with my kids? Because I still definitely wanted to be there for them, like when they get home from school and things like that. And so, and at the time, I had this night job working in a local hotel, which was awful. I hated it. And so, in a bid to just get any port in a storm, I'd heard of freelance writing. I'm like, well, I love personal finance. I'd gone down the Dave Ramsey rabbit hole years before, and then had come in tune with like the FIRE movement and things too after that. And I was like, well, I love personal finance, and I'm reading all these articles, so somebody must be getting paid to write them.
Mm-hmm.
So I hopped on Upwork, which is a freelance website. It's kind of like Craigslist for freelance writing and other freelance things, and just kind of started there and grew it from getting paid like 5 cents a word, and then just gradually working up and up and getting more experience in my niche of personal finance, and started reaching out to people on LinkedIn, got a lot of connections through FinCon, the conference we go to. And from there, I started getting bylines in major publications. It took a while, but that's how I built my career from scratch and from my living room. So
I love that. I think too, I mean, I work in my home because I work remote, but quote unquote outside of the home. But what you said about being home when your kids are home, it's just something, our kids are home by 3. Clearly my work day does not end at 3, as much as
right.
there are days that I would like for it to. But I'm here and I can schedule myself in a way where when they come home, for the most part, I can give them big hugs. I can make them a snack. I can help prep dinner, and I'm here every night when they're here for dinner, right? And so I do think what you were saying of I knew that I wanted to be home for my kids. Now that we're able to be remote and work in this new way, it does offer so many more possibilities of structuring your life more the way you want to, which I think is important. Like if somebody asked me to drive, round trip 2 hours into work every day, it's a non-starter for me. Like it's not, because I see my kids in the morning for less than an hour, and then when they get home until the time they go to bed for a few hours, and I don't want to impede on that time together.
I also think it's very interesting how, from a study standpoint, we know how important it is to spend those, especially those early years with your kids, as much time as possible. But the US workforce is not structured around doing that. And it's just so odd to me because we know the benefits long term of that leads to a better person that's going out to society. But we put so many hurdles in place to not make it easy for families to do that. It's just mind baffling to me.
Yeah, and I think in these days, I feel like with the economy the way it is, it's getting even harder to just rely on one person's income to sustain a family, even if you only have one or two kids. And it's nearly
Hmm.
impossible when you get, and that was another reason for, um, building my career is so that we have fewer fail points. Because if my husband were to get laid off, and that's happened before, like then we're 100% out of income. Whereas if you have two incomes, there's less risk. Like,
Hmm.
there's perks and drawbacks to both, but it's really hard.
And
Yeah.
also it even depends on, like, for example, what your career is prior to maybe becoming a stay-at-home mom, if you do have one. I mean, we have friends who have had four kids, and the mom was a elementary school teacher, and it was like, having this many kids with how much we're going to pay for daycare, I'm just trading my teaching salary for straight to daycare. I might as well stay at home and spend the time and that I would like to spend with my kids. So you have to factor all
Mhm.
that stuff in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's a lot of the kind of the deal breaker for a lot of moms and a lot of families, I think, is like it literally does not make financial sense for me to work.
Yeah.
But then you also have to factor in like, okay, staying in my field, staying credentialed, staying up on the technology, depending on what field you're in. Um, there's opportunity costs there. And I went into being a stay-at-home mom not realizing some of those opportunity costs. It worked out for me, but I really wish if I could go back and tell my younger self, like, these are things you need to think about, is like stay at home mom, it's it's not a career choice, it's a lifestyle choice, but it's not a career. And then and I wish I would have kind of gone into that thinking a little harder about like, okay, this is my choice for this time in my life, and I don't regret that choice. It was definitely the best for my family, but I really wish I would have seen more of the long game. Like, okay, that works now when you're 28. When you're 35, what do you want to do when you're 47, 52, 60? Like, what do you still just want to be at home, or is there something else more fulfilling that you want to do once your kids are grown and flown?
And it was hard for you.
Mhm.
Like, that wasn't modeled in the sense of being able to know to have those thoughts and conversations prior to being a stay-at-home mom. That information wasn't available.
Yeah.
That wasn't people weren't even thinking about that. So it makes it hard
Well,
to have
and
that.
also, yeah, absolutely. And also, like, back in like my parents' generation, like it was totally possible for my family to rely on my dad's income. So financially,
Exactly.
Yes.
that wasn't really a consideration. And my mom also wasn't chomping at the bit to go get a job. She was very fulfilled with
Mhm.
being a mother. Like, that was very fulfilling to her. And for me, I love my kids. They're a wonderful part of my life. Um, they're maybe an essential part of my life, but working fills a bucket that the kids don't fill for me. And I've talked to a lot of stay at home moms that feel the same. And I think that's why you see so many stay at home moms with a side hustle or working from home or doing these things, because, the like staying at home with your kids, it's that cultivating that relationship, but it also like it's that's the mom side of me, not the Jenni side of me. So,
I would also say, like, obviously this is not your situation, but in, too many situations, you do have, like, in the United States, almost a 50% divorce rate. So if you as a
yeah.
woman choose to be a stay-at-home mom, and then you have that gap in your resume, you haven't been building up, saving specifically for yourself, and then, your kids are getting ready to, go back to school or whatever it may be, and now you're separating from your spouse, you're like, what do I do? And I've heard of way too many situations where that's that's how the woman ends up, and it's not a good situation.
Mhm.
Yeah, as doing kind of some research for my own podcast, I'm like, okay, well, what do other stay at home moms? I know my experience, but what do other stay at moms experience? And I joined several Facebook groups, and I saw that month after month after month. I've been a stay at home mom for 10, 15 years, and now my husband cheated on me, or we're getting divorced. Now what do I do? And you have to start from scratch, and one of the other things that kind of got me thinking about a career is I had a friend in high school. He and I knew each other since the sixth grade. He took me on my first date. Um, And he got married to another dear friend right out of high school, which is
Oh
like
my
mind
gosh.
blowing when you're 18 and you're going to
Yeah.
your best friend's wedding.
Oh.
But he was killed in a motorcycle accident when we were 27 and left
Mm.
behind a wife who was also a dear friend and their 3 kids. And the month after I got back from his funeral, I got into a bad car wreck too. And luckily I walked away from it unharmed, but it was a real wake up call. Like, this could happen to me. Like, kind of when you're in your 20s, you have this vague idea of like, oh yeah, death happens, but you don't think it's going to happen to you, and realizing what happens if my spouse dies.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
that is 100% possible. And I have no way to provide for my kids. And, I still need to be at home with them. They're still tinies, but I need to get a plan in place beyond just life insurance to figure out to how to provide for my family if the worst would happen: death, disability, divorce, what have you.
Yeah. I thought we had Aaron Thomas on, a family law attorney, and he focuses on prenups. And we were talking in our episode about if you do have, for example, a stay-at-home mom, if you have a prenup in place, you could put in the protections into the prenup that says, X amount of the income every month is going to go into this type of an account to build your retirement as well, not just, the husband, if it's a,
Mm-hmm.
heteronormative relationship, the husband putting away for retirement is 401k and IRA, et cetera, like putting actual retirement accounts in place for the stay-at-home mom on top of disability insurance and life insurance, and having those protections in place. Because if, just from a basic standpoint, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you are the chauffeur, you're the cook, you're the person who does the laundry, you're the, the housekeeper, you're the tutor, you're doing all those things
24/7.
24/7. If you are in that car accident that you were just describing and the outcome would have been unfavorable, what would your partner have done in that time, right? With the children, would they have to take off of work, which then again impacts the family income? I mean, there's so many snowball scenarios that can happen in an instant. And if you don't have those protections in place for both of the people in the relationship, it can be really detrimental if something were to happen.
I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the conversation that is starting to be had that should have been had for a long time is the monetary value that stay-at-home moms actually have, even though they're not being paid for their work.
Unpaid labor.
And you can put a monetary value to it. When I've worked with clients that have, the wife is a stay-at-home mom, and I was like, you could put a dollar amount on all the things. I said you could put I should say this, you could put an approximate dollar amount, because let's be honest,
Yeah.
But
you're
haven't
not going to be able to
articles
put a dollar
said-
amount that you
Well,
could put on the work they really do.
priceless. But isn't it like on average like $180,000 a year if
It's
you break down?
It's something ridiculous
roles?
because it's a 24/7 nonstop, job that you're doing.
Mhm.
And also, most of the times in those scenarios is that having the stay-at-home mom also is allowing the husband to maximize his potential in his career, because some of the things that he can take on and do, he wouldn't be able to do if he didn't have a supportive wife that could handle everything else at home.
Right.
And I think that's a
Absolutely.
conversation that has been missed and is desperately needed. And I'm glad that, it's starting to be talked about.
Me too. And just for all the reasons you touched on, we have life insurance for me as well, because you're right.
Mhm.
Like, you kind of take for granted that someone is on call 24/7 for in case there's a sick day, in case there's a half day. Don't get me started with half
Oh,
days. and how
yeah.
I feel about half days at school. But
Random
Us
teacher work days.
too.
or
Yeah.
just and I feel like no week in my house is normal, because there's
Mhm.
always a half day, or someone's sick, or someone has a field trip or a project, or has to be somewhere to do something, like, or an appointment. Like, there's always something going on.
Mhm.
And to have someone there 24/7 available to field whatever comes, like you say, that's nigh unto priceless. You could not pay someone else to do that.
Yeah.
So
No. Talk to us about Mama's Money Map and where that idea came from, and what you're working on helping stay-at-home moms with, and how you're doing that.
yeah, the idea for it was born when I was driving my kids to school, and we lived in a rural area, so the drive was long. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. And like I said, I'd kind of fallen down the personal finance rabbit hole, and I was listening to this podcast, and I won't tell you which one it is. It's a very large one, and I have fierce respect for this podcaster, so I won't say what it is. But she was talking about how like a productivity hacks and things. And one of the things that she suggested was you can sleep one less hour a night. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Oh my gosh.
it's like
I feel like
already
I
got
know
toddlers
who
waking
this
me up.
podcast was. Yeah. Okay.
Must be
Yeah,
someone
and
without
like, and
kids.
yes, it was someone without kids. And honestly, for someone without kids, they're living a totally different life with different needs. And, if you're,
Different
can
luxuries.
sleep in, absolutely. And so
Yeah.
that would have made sense for them, but it did not make sense for me. And then I realized, like, this person isn't talking to me for my situation. I think even if that person was right next to me and saw my life as a fly on the wall, they would realize, maybe that's not a good fit for you.
Right.
But I also didn't feel like there was anyone talking to stay-at-home moms with some of the limitations that they have, and some of the, like, even the psychological elements of, I'm not making any money and I sort of feel guilty about that and I want to contribute, but all my labor's unpaid and I get, paid in sticky kisses. There are different hurdles to clear. And I wanted to talk specifically to some of those families that had some of those same, issues, challenges, to have someone else that had been through the same thing talk to them. I was like, oh, I could do that. So that's kind of what Mama's Money Map is designed to be.
I think telling people just wake up at 3 a.m. to have your hour of coffee and your meditation time uninterrupted. It's like, even if I did that at 3 a.m., it would still be interrupted. I guarantee you, because our son still comes in and interrupts our sleep on a very regular basis.
And I love that you have that revelation and you're like, I can create something that speaks to the women that are going through the same things that I'm going through. Because even as a dad, like, I try to be as present as possible. That's exactly, the type of dad that I want to be. The reality is that, like, I think as a dad, unless like you are a single dad and you're taking care of your kids by yourself, the extra stuff's always going to fall to the mom. Like, that's just
Default
as much as
parents.
you want to try and be, 50-50, it's just not. And like, I realize that as much as I would like it to be, the things do fall to her. So like, I can't even understand from that standpoint because I'm not having that experience.
Right.
Yeah, it's the mental load that they talked about. Like, there has to be a logistics coordinator, someone that knows all the appointments and the birthdays and the insurance details and, and on and on, like, all these little details. And like you say, it's hard to quantify that and it's hard to explain that. And it's also hard to delegate that. Like, I'm lucky that I have a really supportive husband. And he supported me through the stay-at-home mom years, and now Trish transitioning to more equitable with, he and I are both working. And he's always asking, like, what can I do to take off your plate? But I'm still logistics coordinator. I'm still the one that knows the things that need to be done. So, and there's a burden that comes with that.
Yeah. We have an exciting episode. By the time this comes out, that one will have come out, with Eve Rodsky on making your home more equitable. So shout out to Eve and Fair Play. If you haven't read it, definitely give that a read. And that's exactly what that conversation is about, is making the invisible visible, and all the things that go into daily life as a parent, and as a parent of multiple children that all have different needs, different things happening in their classrooms with extracurriculars. They need to be in different places at different times. Oh, we got to get this birthday party gift for this birthday. And I mean, it is literally nonstop. Oh, and now they have to wear an orange polka dotted shirt on Tuesday for Dalmatian Day. You know what? No. Like, it makes me want to just like rip all my hair out when I get the calendars that are
Spirit
like,
days, yeah.
wear this on Spirit Day. Like,
I want to touch
Ain't nobody
on
got time for that.
Nobody.
I want to touch on the one thing that I just heard you say about, the feeling of guilt because all the work that you do isn't necessarily quantifiable from a dollar standpoint as, going into your pocket. That's always interesting to me because I guess it's a little bit different how I grew up. Like, I grew up, my mom raised my brother and I by herself. And so she had to play both roles. But it's also very interesting where, like, I've seen that interaction where, you have the stay-at-home mom. And like you said, there is some guilt because you're like, I'm not bringing in money to help support the family when, like, you are literally supporting the family, and the dynamic that could be a positive or it could be a negative dynamic in regards to when discussing money when you're not quote unquote bringing in money.
Like how to divide it, how like making your household rules.
Yeah, and like what
on
conversations you have, because I'm gonna go on the opposite of the negative standpoint. I know scenarios where we know people who the mom has been stay at home and the husband is the one working, and the husband makes large financial decisions without having a conversation.
Like buying a car.
Like I'm gonna go buy a Mercedes or I'm gonna go buy a BMW,
a luxury car,
without having a conversation with my wife about it. And I think almost they feel like they can make that decision because they quote unquote bring in the money.
Yeah. Do you talk to your Mama's Money Map folks about things like that and how to make sure that those financial goals and rules are in alignment and in place? Or
well, it's still a pretty new podcast, so that hasn't come up yet. But that is, oh my gosh, that's a gut wrenching. I hate those car commercials that glorify, honey, I bought you a car. That's my husband knows, like he would have not ever come home with a new car.
No.
But I think if you do choose to be a stay-at-home parent, then, and I know personal finance is personal and everyone, has to do what works best for their family. But I can't see a case for not completely pooling all financial means into one pot in a family that has a stay-at-home parent. Because like you said, every bit of that parent's work is uncompensated financially. And so it's insane to me that anyone would feel entitled. I mean, kind of I'll go back to Brandon, what you're saying, like the supporting the family, the stay-at-home mom is kind of the legs the family stands on in some regards. And so going and making financial decisions, it's kind of like cutting your legs out from under you in a way. I think, and even if you have a family where the husband and wife are both working or the spouses are both working and both bringing in an even-ish income, all of those big financial decisions should still go through both parties because they affect both parties.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I almost view it as disrespectful. Like it is disrespectful. Like it seems as though like you don't value your spouse as a true partner.
Right.
And that's the part that like would rub me the wrong way because, Jess makes more than I do. And even if roles were reversed, like our decisions for large purchases are always made together because we are working as a team.
Right.
And that's always, baffling to me when people don't have those conversations because then you're not truly working as a team. And if you're not working as a team, I find it very hard to believe that you're going to accomplish any great goals that you guys have, from a financial standpoint. Yeah.
And having a supportive working spouse, I feel like is critical to making the stay-at-home decision even possible. Because otherwise it opens the door to, like you said, some of those financial decisions that run the gamut of disrespect to full-on financial abuse.
Right. So, yeah, we definitely.
I think it's why it's important it's important for stay-at-home moms to even think about things like credit score and, like you said, retirement savings and things like that. Because just because you're not working doesn't mean you don't need access to money or to become familiar with money. The nice thing that I'm finding is in most cases that I know of, and I don't have, statistics to back this up, but just my anecdotal experience, most of the time the stay-at-home mom is the one managing the money, even if she's not making it.
Yeah.
So I would say
that's the experience for my mom.
I would say that's also historically, like, even going back to like, our parents, our parents' parents, in 50s, 60s, 70s, the husband is the one working, but who's actually managing the home, the finances?
Yeah.
The wife. Yeah. So this isn't something new. It's just that it wasn't spoken about openly.
Right.
It was just understood back then, I think, as a gender role.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on two things, Jenny. The first is for anybody listening that is a stay-at-home mom or maybe is looking to transition into being a stay-at-home mom, are there a few fundamental strategies or tips that you would give them of what kind of things to be aware of, to look for, to ask for, to make sure that they have in place? And then part two is when we spoke previously, you have five children, right?
Yeah.
and on a less than high income. And so managing a large family on, a lower income, would love to hear how you're doing that, because life is so expensive too.
Yeah. And it's evolved over time. So back to your first
Yeah.
question. Remind me what it was. I'm sorry.
What,
I was
yeah,
waiting for
sorry.
that. I was like, that's a long question, babe.
I know. I'm sorry. That was on me.
Mom
That was on me.
brain.
I got excited. What kind of things should stay-at-home moms that are either already stay-at-home moms or looking
Right.
to become stay-at-home moms have in place as protections to make sure that things are more equitable in their home?
I think really open, honest communication with your spouse is at the core. And I think almost overly communicating what's happening with the finances, what your plans are for the future. Like, I'm only going to stay home until, little Susie's in preschool and then I'm going back to work, or I want to have this many kids, so I'll be out of the workforce for this long, or then we'll switch. Like some families switch and have the dad stay at home after a while if they both have careers going into it. And we use this broad term stay at home mom or stay at home parent when really it's really blurry exactly what that means. I think a generation ago it would have been different. And maybe it's just that you take a sacrifice and get a work at home job that's either part-time or that is lesser pay so you can be at home with the kids. Like, it takes so many different forms. And I think the one core that will make it successful for both spouses is constant and very clear communication, and also ongoing realizing that how your family looks is going to change. Like, being a stay-at-home parent to an infant is very different than being a stay-at-home parent to a toddler or school age kids, and the needs and demands on both parents, both the working spouse and the stay-at-home spouse, change and evolve over time. And so keeping in touch with your partner about what you need and being very honest about what you need. And if you're getting burnt out and if you're feeling unfulfilled, or if maybe your partner wants to change their career and what that means for you staying at home, like just constantly communicating that with your spouse to figure out a plan that works for you both. I also think looking to the future, like, do you want to just not work for the rest of your life? I think most people don't. There are some people that, mothering fills that bucket, and then I'm obviously speaking to heteronormative relationships, but like that fills your bucket and you don't need anything else. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule. So just looking for a plan for the future, even if that's 5-10 years down the road. Like my plan for freelance writing to grow, it was a 5-year plan, and it did take about 5 years to get to the point where I'm like, oh, this could be a full-time thing. It's not, because I'm still, because half days are still a thing. But you're just looking a little further down the road and realizing that the life evolves and changes. So,
And what I hear is a
Communication.
similarity to how financial planning should be done. Communication and planning.
and timelines, right?
Yes.
And your goals.
And realizing that things
huge.
evolve and change. And like you said, it's not just the idea of a plan, it's the constant practice of planning as things change.
Yeah. Well, I love that you called out too, it's very different being home with an infant than it is with a toddler who's learned to walk versus a school age child. I mean, your day, their needs, the finances involved with that, those are so varied in each of those stages, and you get to them very quickly, right? Like that first year, I mean, you barely come up for air and you're throwing their first birthday party, it feels like.
I totally, for some reason, forgot that with our first child, our daughter, when she was born, and after, Jess had 3 months worth of maternity leave and went back to work, 2 days out of the week, I was having her at home initially. Yeah. And as an infant, I was like, oh, I can get some work done and whatnot. And I quickly realized that that is not, it's not going to be productive. Like you think you're going to get something done, and then I have to do something with her.
Wrote one email.
And then you get thrown off, then it takes you a while to get back in the swing, and then something else happens. So I definitely was not a stay-at-home, parent by any means to the full extent, but I got a glimpse at it and I was like, this is tough.
Yeah. And also babies don't just sleep all day.
Sure don't.
I think that's the misconception of oh, you can get so much done. Why isn't this huge pile of laundry done? The baby just slept all day. And it's like, Oh, so
That's
many
what I
thoughts
don't know why. I
there.
don't know how I forgot about that. Like I hadn't even thought about
Yeah,
that till
you
this moment.
probably like tucked it away and had some PTSD from it. Oh
We
my
forget a
gosh.
lot. Well, and the hard
Yeah.
part too is as a mom, the kids chop up your day so
Mm-hmm.
bad. Like someone needs a band-aid, someone gets hungry, you know, someone had an accident. So, like it's if
Mm-hmm.
it's not one thing, it's another. And that choppiness makes it, erodes your productivity no matter if you're folding laundry or checking emails, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Exactly. Talk to us about how you're a family of 7 and you're making it work. We have 2 and I'm like, how does anybody with more than 2 feed their kids, buy berries for their kids, put them in activities? Like, I don't understand. Help us make it make sense, Jenny.
So I should add, like we said, life grows and life changes, and so I have 4 bio kids, and he's not an official foster. He just kind of came to live with us unofficially. Long story. I'll save it. That's that's a whole
Okay,
other podcast
another
about
part
how
2.
that
Oh
happened.
my God. Wait, how old is he?
Yeah,
Can we know how old he
but
is?
well, he's 18 now. So luckily,
Oh,
so
okay.
actually, I
Okay.
didn't really talk about him before just because yeah, I was worried about bio parents and stuff
Okay.
like that on
Yeah.
the internet. So, but he's 18, so he's an adult. So he's
Okay.
actually moved out now and he's got his job and is thriving in his new
Oh.
job and new place. So, but before we had 4 kids for most of my mothering experience. And my husband is a wildlife biologist, which took us to a lot of remote areas because that's where the wildlife are, is where the humans aren't. And
Yes.
so we have
The
lived
beautiful
all over
places.
the place. Yeah, well, some of them.
Yeah.
West Texas is not a beautiful place, but
Oh, yeah. Okay.
we've lived in Nebraska and South Dakota and Montana and upstate New York. Um, so all these different places, each one is its own story. But again, whole nother podcast. So, but all of them have one thing in common, and that's that the cost of living is very low in most
Mm.
of the places we've lived. We're actually fortunate enough in West Texas to have our housing subsidized as part of my husband's job, and that
Oh,
was
nice.
huge.
That's nice.
Um,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people house hack, and it's interesting that in that part of the world, I think partly because it's not the prettiest part of the world, there's a lot more jobs than I realized that had housing as a benefit. Like cowboys, ranchers, and even the teachers out there had housing in some of
Wow.
these rural towns. So that
Huh.
was a big thing, and just the lower cost of living. And with that lower cost of living, there wasn't this expectation that your kids did every activity or was doing club sports. They're playing in the woods and playing with each other and things like that. So
Yeah.
there wasn't as much pressure to have like the nicest clothes and things like that for the kids. And I think that was really liberating. And I think it was something I took for granted at the time, but it really helped us spend money on what was important and get by with a lot less. I also side hustled basically my husband took care of like the needs and my side hustles usually took care of the wants. So that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
That is so interesting because like you mentioned some things like I didn't even think about, like the pressure that's we see, like because of like where we live and stuff like that, of your kids to do all these activities because
Mm.
all these other kids are doing these activities. I never even like really thought about that standpoint. And then also our daughter for like a year was in a private school, and as a kid, like I was always a public school kid, and I always like was like, how can you wear uniforms? As an adult, uniforms are amazing
The best.
Oh my
because you
gosh.
don't
The
have to worry
best.
Yeah,
about
I have a
buying
daughter
all
in a
these
charter
extra
school.
clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Light blue or
And
dark
well,
blue
and the
today?
nice thing,
Pick one.
right? And our daughter's school, I have one daughter that goes to a charter school, and they have a closet actually. So when you grow out of your clothes, you just put them back in the school closet. And the first thing we did when we signed them up is, here, come to the closet and pick khakis and polos or whatever
That's
that fit,
awesome.
because you don't have to worry about if they're cool or not. You just have to worry if they fit. It's the same
Yeah.
thing everybody's wearing.
It's so great. I
So
mean, she didn't like it. It took, 2 to 3 weeks for her to wrap her head around.
She's our creative.
She's the creative. She wants to be a fashion designer, our fashionista. So for her to have very limited options was not good for her. It was great for us because the mornings are like very like pick out your clothes the night before. And even then she wants to change them. But I feel like the clothes that we did buy for her lasted longer because she was wearing a uniform all day, because like yesterday she came home and there was a hole in her pants, right? So I felt like the things that we were purchasing and spending our money on actually lasted longer because of the school uniforms. But I guess it all comes out in the wash. But the call out of some of these rural places offering housing as part of the compensation package, I mean, that's an excellent thing for somebody to look into that I wasn't aware of that would exist. So, I mean, if you can have your housing subsidized, that's a huge chunk, usually the biggest part of your fixed cost.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it actually allowed us to buy a couple of rentals in that area of the world that
Oh,
we
nice.
still own. So,
perfect.
and because the housing is so cheap, it is a very low barrier to entry in real estate, which is nice as well.
So, are you technically part of the FIRE movement, Jenni?
I mean, I flirted with it for a while, and then it got to it. We made some like family decisions. We now live in Utah, which is, I don't know if you look at the real estate market, but it's insane here. Like the cost of living isn't that bad, holistically speaking. It's just the real estate that's really rough. So anyhow, yeah, real estate here is insane. And that's part of why I'm working more. But we came here to be near family. My dad has Parkinson's and my mom has cancer. So it was kind of a mindful choice to you know, and you can't, it's hard to put a price on that time.
No, you can't.
Just kind of like with your kids. So you make it work. But
absolutely.
So we did, in answer to your previous question, we were kind of a part of the FIRE movement for a long time, but also realizing there was kind of a ceiling to my husband's career, and then also moving here kind of put that on hold. So we're doing fine, but I don't think we'll fire, maybe like 5 years early, but not quite as early as we were aiming for before. So
yeah. Well, and the FIRE movement, for those who are not familiar, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And so when you were talking about like house hacking and things, I was like, wait, is she part of FIRE? Because you have to be so intentional, right? You have to be intentional to grow your wealth in general. But if you're like, hey, I want to retire by the time I'm 37, that's not going to happen overnight. And that's not going to happen without a plan in place.
But what's funny about the FIRE movement is that a lot of people, once they get to the R and the E, they're like, I don't necessarily want to retire early. I just want to do something different. That's what happens often.
Or the people around you or your close friends are a lot of times also still working. So what are you doing in the time that you're off?
Yeah, what do you do all day?
Yeah, because your circle is still working.
There's very few people that are like full FIRE and not bringing in any active working income. They just are financially independent, which is amazing and great. And now they have the luxury and the ability to choose what they do from a working standpoint, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, the work optional part.
I think that's what everyone's working towards in some aspect, is being work optional, having more free time to choose how they want to spend that free time.
Totally.
And that's one thing too that kind of took us out of like true FIRE is my husband, as a biologist, he loves his job. He wakes up ecstatic to go to work every day. I mean, he flies in helicopters and counts deer and sedates moose. And I joke that he's basically like Indiana Jones and gets paid for it. And so as far as what he would want to do all day when he's retired, he want to do then what he's doing now. So it's hard to want to like jump ship when you have your dream job. So that's another thing that took us out of true, pure FIRE, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and how many people can truly say they have a dream job, right? So, I mean, that's such a blessing that he wakes up excited every day to do what he loves. And if he can do that because he loves it and his attitude is great and it provides a nice living, and he can do that for 20 more years, awesome. Or 20 plus years. I mean, that's the dream ultimately, isn't it?
I think it's also just understanding that, like, for example, if you are doing FIRE and you get to the point where like I can retire, at 35 and the average life expectancy is 85.
Ooh, that's a long time.
That's a 50 years. And I with today's economy is not the economy of yesterday. So you have so many other variables. And when you stretch out that time frame even further, the risk is exponentially higher in regards to not having enough money. So I think a lot of people don't take into account some of the unknown, because like I remember Jess, like this several years back before we even got married, said that she had met somebody and they were retired early. And I was like, they're our age and they're retired early. I was like, unless this person has like $7 or $8 million, I can tell you they're not retiring early. Like mathematically, that's not going to work.
Yeah. I think it was a
Coast
temporary
fire maybe,
retirement.
but
Yeah, exactly. What would you want to leave our listeners with that are working moms, stay-at-home moms, moms that would like to be at home more with their children when it comes to their finances and ensuring that they can, build the life that is meaningful to them?
I think you kind of answered it with that last part, is building a life that's meaningful to you. A lot of people think like, oh, I can't stay home. I economically can't stay home with my kids. Like I can't afford to. And that may be true, but staying at home with your kids, if that is a priority for you and if that's what's best for your family, it's a lot more achievable than people really think. They think, I have to send my kids to private school. They have all these activities and I have to, shower them with Christmas presents. Like if you're willing to scale back your expectations for your kids' lives. And I look, even a generation ago, a lot of that stuff wasn't a high priority. And I feel like kids today are in a lot of cases, kind of overscheduled. They should go from gymnastics to karate to, a tutoring session to church activities and tennis and golf. And it's like, let's just slow down and let them be kids, and that's free. And like, obviously give them enriching experiences so that they can grow their talents, but maybe they don't need 5 of them. And so if you're willing as a parent to scale back your expectations of like this lavish childhood for your kids, then you probably can give them a stay-at-home parent if that's important to you. And again, there are some people that being at home with their kids would drive them up the wall and make them into mean mom, which is a legit concern. So this is not a one size fits all thing at all. But I wouldn't, if that's important to you and if that's what's best for your family, I would dig in to see if you really can make it work financially. And you may be surprised, especially like you said, with the savings on childcare and some of those other conveniences. It may be more possible than people think.
Yeah. I love that you said that and called that out, because I do think our kids are overscheduled. And one thing that we've been really happy about lately is that our kids, they come home from school, they're at around 3, they have a snack, and then they play with the neighborhood kids. And they are just running, from house to house, from our backyard to their backyard, from the swing set to the trampoline. They're doing chalk, they're doing scooters, they're, playing basketball outside. Yesterday
Things
they did
that we
face
did in
paint.
the 80s and 90s.
Right. And it's like you said, it's free and they are having a blast and they're sleeping better and they're getting their energy out and they're in nature and in fresh air and they don't ask for their tablets. They're not asking to watch television. They're not ruining the playroom, like all the things. And I'm like, oh, this is free and I love it. And it's great. And now that's not to say that we don't want them to do a team sport or pick up, an instrument down the line. But I mean, for my mental health, I'm like, I can't have my kids in 5 activities each. I mean, I don't want to be just their chauffeur where I'm just toting them around.
Yeah.
So I think calling that out, or even we've told friends and family when they're like, what do they need for their birthday or what do they want? They don't need anything. Read a book to them, do a puzzle, go take them to the library, take them to the park and have popsicles after.
Put some money in their investment account that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we've done that's actually been really good, we don't do this every year, but it was 5er parties, but inflation, you could do 10er parties, is where on the invitation we said, your presence is the greatest present, but if you want to bring a present, then just bring a $5 or a $10 bill and a card. And that way that saves your playroom from all the junk that is going to buy or break in like a week that people buy, and they can save up and buy something that's really important to them.
Yes.
So that's one thing we've done that's been really helpful on the party.
I love that. I suggested that this year for Roman because he turned 5 and I was like, oh, he's turning $5 bill. It's perfect. And Brandon was like, I think he's still very much in the phase of like, I want to open a present. And so I asked him, would you rather have presents or would you rather have people? Because we know our circle. Nobody wants to show up empty-handed, right? And so I said, or would you rather everybody bring $5 and you get to pick? We go to the store, you can put some in your piggy bank, but then you get to actually buy something that you're really excited about. And he was like, I want the presents. But next year we're definitely going to go with the $5 or the gift card, or, however people want to do that, with a few dollars, because I do think it also gives them an opportunity to, what they enjoy because they were gifted it is very different than what they would prioritize if they were spending their own money. And so I think those lessons are really, really valuable as well as they get older. So awesome.
Absolutely. And it's kind of the gift that gives twice, is because you open it up and you're like, oh, yay, money. And then you get to go to the store and then pick, and then you get to open it. So
no, I love that. I think that's a great idea and a great call out. And the last 2 birthdays he's had just at a local park. It's been great. They spend a couple hours running around. We did rent the shelter, but it's so much cheaper than, these $300, $400, $500 birthday parties where you're renting the jump place or the blow up place or the, I mean, it's all just, life is so expensive. So I think grounding ourselves back in like the time together is really what's special. And the kids are not going to remember what you bought them for their 5th birthday. I think those things like that, and being really intentional again with where you spend your time and energy and money, is really what you have to do in order to build that meaningful life for yourself and your family.
Absolutely. One litmus test that I kind of do is I like fast forward a few years. And like you said, they're not going to remember next year what they got for this year's birthday. And kind of going back to like extracurriculars. Okay, is my kid going to be happy that they did this at like 25 or 30? They may not care about, joining the tennis team. They may not care about karate. They may still play an instrument, and you can't always know ahead of time what's going to click with your kids. But, there's a lot of those things that, if they won't care down the road, should it really be a financial priority now? Yeah,
that's a great way to think about it. Well, Jenni, thank you so much for being with us today. We're so excited about this conversation and sharing it with our audience. Where can our audience find you, your work, your podcast?
I'm on mamasmoneymap.com, and the Mama's Money Map podcast is wherever you listen to podcasts, except YouTube. We're still getting YouTube up and running.
Perfect.
But it's MAMAS. There's like 4 ways to spell mama, and I had to just pick one. So apparently there's more domains I need to buy, but Mama's Money Map. Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram and the podcast.
Perfect. We will make sure to link that in our show notes so that everybody can connect with you and learn from your podcast as well. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yay.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money.